Okay, welcome back. It's been a long time since I shot a video of the system here and the little demo project that I have going on. I have a couple of changes and some things that I wanted to talk about with relation to deployments today. So you'll notice over here that I have my demo DB. It has another table in it called add column demo. And again, this goes back to the same old project that I've been using for a while. And I wanted to make sure that the information on how to make these deployments and how to set them up and how to use them was pretty clear. So I'm going to open my local publish here, load up my values, make sure that I'm able to connect for my deployment, and it is able to connect. I'm going to choose advanced, and I'm actually going to say drop objects in target, but not in source. And I'm going to leave this ignore column order, column data sensitivity classifications, that sort of stuff. Okay. Um, and just kind of and deploy this. So first thing I'm going to do is just publish it real quick. And then you see that it's successfully published. As I refresh the project here, now my tables line up, right? Customer phone and phone type. And I've got customer phone and phone type as part of that. So let's say I had another table out here. I wanted to create another table and I want to call that email. So I've got an ID and I'm going to call that email ID. And I'm going to say customer ID, which is not null, email address. I'm going to call that with a variable character of 256 because some email addresses get pretty long. And I'm going to call that, well, no, we'll add that later. And so let me say constraint of primary key email is my primary key, and that is a clustered key. And if we haven't talked about clustered keys, let's do that real quick. So when you have a cluster or clustered index, so that's really what this is. This turns into a clustered index. It stores the data on disk in the order that the ID is created. So the other thing I want to do here is create this as an identity. So some people call this an auto number, and sometimes you can call it an identity. So this starts at 1 with an increment value of 1. So its seed is 1 and its increment value is 1. You could say the increment value is 2 and it starts at 1. So it would go to 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, right? But most people just do this, right? 1 and 1 and are all set to go. So, okay, so there's my email table, right? And I don't have any tests around it yet. So I'm going to add a store procedure. And goodness, it's been so long. I'm going to look at phone exists. I'm going to say demo tests. Okay, so demo tests, the cert object exists dbo.email, right? So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that and I'm going to add a store procedure um, demo tests dot test space um, email table exists. Right, I'm going to add that in there. Take that, get rid of that. email, right? And that's just a basic quick assertion that says, hey, right, email table exists, we're good to go. No big deal. So now my tests will match the rest of my my project. So that's good, right? All right, so let's deploy our demo DB project here. And it's going to go through a build real quick. And it's going to say, hey, we want to test that stuff out. We're going to look in advance. We're going to say drop objects not in source. Um, we're ignoring ANSI nulls, ignoring a bunch of stuff, right? File sizes, fill factors, that kind of thing. So let's say you have some specific indexes, and we can talk about fill factors another day. I'll put that on the list of things to talk about. But for now, let's just publish this, and then it's published. We'll refresh it. Boom, bing, bong. There's our email table, and there's our email ID, our customer ID, and our email address. So let's say let's ask a basic question and say, well, how many emails do you have? You might have 10. Um, Personally, I have about 6. So if we look at email, um, we might say that we need some maybe type of email, right? Email type. And we need email types. Um, Email type ID. And I always get rid of this primary key that's back there. And I say, oops, if I can type, we'll say, we'll make that about 50 characters or so. And we'll say not null. And then we want to say deleted. So this is um, uh, I'll explain this in just a second. Uh, as I get done typing. And I think I went through a while back about what what the braces mean, like the hard braces. That, of course, is that denotes an object in SQL Server. So anyway, so we're creating an email type table here. We're going to have a description and we're going to have it deleted. So what this deleted is about is it says, hey, this particular type is no longer in use, but it allows the types in the email table to persist and be used within the application until such a time as they're changed. So then over here on the email table, right, we're back looking at the email table now. I'm going to say I want email type ID in here as an int, as a not null value, right? And I'm going to say constraint foreign key email type references EBO email type email type ID. Okay. So then now we have a foreign key up here, right? Email to email type ID that says, hey, on the email table, we want to make sure that that email type ID is there. So let's say I had two or 300,000 customers already, and all of those customers have email addresses, right? But that email address does not have a particular type ID. It doesn't have, it doesn't have anything relating to being a type ID or anything like that. So if I was to take this new column that I put in the middle of the table and just say deploy, what would happen? What would happen? Well, let's look at that. Let's look at that real quick. So I'm going to load that up. I'm going to go into advanced. I'm going to make sure that it's dropping objects not in source, but I'm not going to put the checkbox here in ignore column order. So I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to say generate a script, right? Show me the script. Show me what would happen. So let's look at this. So it's going to start a transaction and it's going to set it to serializable. So what serializable means is that the transaction cannot be interrupted. It must remain whole and it locks everything down until it's complete. Okay? So what it does is it creates this temporary table. First thing it does is set transaction abort on, meaning that the whole batch fails or the whole batch goes through. But if you look up here, it says it creates a temporary table, TMP underscore MS underscore XX email, right? And then it puts in our email type ID right here under email, and then customer ID and email address, right? Which is fine. And then it says, hey, if that exists, right, select out that identity from the old email table, and then we're gonna jam that into set identity insert on. We're gonna jam all of those records into the new email temp table, and then we're gonna turn identity off. Then we're gonna drop the old email table, and then we're gonna rename the new table that they just created, this temp table up here, to be email, right? And then it's going to add the key constraint, and then it's going to commit that transaction and reset the transaction isolation level. And it's also going to create my new table of email type. And then down here, after email type is created, it's going to do an alter table email type, adding that constraint for the default. And then it's also going to go through and add that email type ID to the email table as a foreign key constraint. And then it's going to publish my phone types, right? Because that's in the post deployment script. Well, let's say we've got a giant table and we really don't want it to do all this. We don't want it to go through the process of making this temp table and then copying the data and doing the stuff. And right, this is a big old drag. Oh man, we really don't want to do that. So let's do something else. Let's open up publish again, load up our values, go into advanced, click on ignore column order. Now, what this is telling the deployment engine, it's saying, hey, if the columns in the destination tables are out of order, we don't care. We're just going to do an alter table at that point. So let's look at what that looks like down here. So we're saying now we just have an alter table email, add email type ID of an integer value that happens that it's saying is not null. Well, there's no data in the table, right? And then it adds this email type. So there's no data in our table yet. And then it adds the default constraint and the foreign key constraint, and we're good to go. So let's go into our email table, and we're going to say view data, and I'm going to say an email ID I'm going to say customer ID of 1, email address of abc@123.com, and I'm going to say this is abc at 456.com, because I'm just making these up, right? And this is DEF at QED Okay, so there we go. We saved all that out. It's in there. If we look back and we say view data again, there's our data that we just added with new email address IDs, right? 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so in this instance, it just wanted to add this is our first publish. This is our second publish. It just wanted to do an add and alter table, right? An email type ID not null. Okay, cool. Let's publish. Let's create another publish. Again, we'll do the same thing over here that says ignore column order, and we're going to generate that script and look at it. So what would it do if there was data in the table? Again, it would do an alter table email add email type ID not null. Same thing. So now that we know that there's data in the table and it's going to do that, let's run that. Alter table only allows columns to be added that contain nulls or have a default definition specified, or the column being added or identity of timestamp column, blah, 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 right? Okay, so that fails. Why did it fail? Well, it failed because this is a not null. Um, so how would we get it to um, to to do this? So you have two options. You can either start it out as null, and then at the next deployment after that, define a default. You could say constraint df email type default 1 because it hasn't added that primary key yet to email type. Let's see what we get there. Right, and this is just an alter of the script. I haven't altered the root table yet. We're just changing the script. Oh, now it worked because if we refresh that, there's my email type, right? And I have my default constraint, right? I have my primary key, which also has that foreign key, but the foreign key alter table conflicted with foreign key constraint. The conflict occurred in database demo DB, email type, right? Email type ID, because there wasn't an actual email type there yet. So what's the best thing to do? The best thing to do is to allow null on the column that you created. No, can't redo it now. The best thing to do is to allow null on the column that you created. And as a consequence of that is to, if you want to back publish that data or back fill that data, keep in mind that an update statement actually does a delete and an insert. So if you had 10 million email addresses and you wanted to add a column to that table, the best thing you can do is just make it nullable, even if it has a foreign key, right? So if I go in here and I say, okay, I've got this constraint, I'm saying not null, no big deal, right? Because it allows nulls. Yes, I have a constraint on it that's a foreign key, and it's going to look at that foreign key when I try and jam something into it, especially if I have um, a default. So I can do an alter table add add constraint, df email type, um, that's right, email type default one. Right? So this then adds that default constraint of one. What doesn't it like about that? Doesn't like that. Right? So it adds that default constraint of one. Oh, I'm gonna have to get that syntax right, or it's gonna drive me nuts. Anyway, so that's how you'd go in and add that default. And why isn't it so if I wanted to add a default up here? What did it do? Hmm, that's interesting that it added it after the foreign key constraint. That's all right. I prefer them to be named, but it is what it is. Anyway, you get the point. The point is to allow it to be null and add it. But if you add a default like this, then it again, it's going to go through and try and backfill the table. So let's look at that real quick. It's good to know how these options work in publish mode. So even if we ignore column order and go through and look at it before so that you don't get surprised later on, right? So alter table email drop constraint, and that's because it's looking at this email type ID. So if we go through and I delete that constraint, and then I'm going to delete the foreign key, and then I'm going to delete the column. Now it's gone. So let's look again at what we get out of the publish, right? That value of dev. Look in advanced, say ignore column order, right? Because we don't care. Let's see what it does. Again, we're adding that column with a default of one and making it nullable, right? And then we're just adding that that foreign key constraint to email type. So because it's nullable, I'm not sure that the foreign key constraint will still succeed, but let's try it. Yep. So there we go. We're good to go. And if we actually look at the table now, those are null because they remained null and it allowed null. But if we put in a 4 there and an IDK at IDK dot CA dot com dot AU, right? And we're gonna that. Okay, the data in row 4 was not committed. Insert statement conflicted with the foreign key constraint. That's right, because then why did it do that? Yeah, there's no data. There's no data in email type. Yes, I know. Invalid date. I know it's invalid data. I'm trying to get rid of it. Oh, it doesn't want to let you do it. And delete doesn't want to let you do it either. So this leaves you in a doom loop. That is definitely not good. All right, so let's just add a row over here. Default deleted as false. All right, and then we can stick a 1 in that and hit enter, and it's good to go. So we're going to get rid of this data anyway, and we're going to actually create some email types in the next video. But for tonight, that's pretty much it, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks.